What is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 7 of What If Deku Got Black Whip Early. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. It was time. The days had expired. Sweat and blood had been burnt at work. Hours of labor all paid up to develop special moves or improve their quirks. Now it was time to put it to the test. Midoriya inhaled deeply with much difficulty. The air here felt sour and stale, almost like it had soaked up all the tension and anxiety the class exuded. They'd gotten off their bus right in front of the Takoba National Stadium where the provisional license exams would take place, and then the class met their competition. Different schools, some said to be on par with the prestigious UA High. The intensity the rivaling schools gave off said it all. It didn't take long for the other schools to make an impression on the class of one. Sayurashi gave a vigorous bow as an apology after he'd briefly interrupted their huddle, bleeding from his skull in the process after his head met the concrete from such a forceful bow. Despite his queer behavior, the lad wasn't to be underestimated. He'd gotten top scores in the UA entrance exams but refused the offer. Shoto warned the student he'd be a force to reckon with. Over 1,000 students were gathered inside the national stadium as they listened to the explanation of the exams and received the news that was neither all too shocking or pleasant. Only 100 candidates would be selected from the first exam to participate in the actual exam. It was a given. This wasn't fun and games. It was an obvious bar they'd have to exceed if they wished to get the license that would allow them to work like pros and use their quirks publicly. It wasn't going to be easy. On a slightly brighter side, the first exam dealt with speed. Izuku gave a quick sigh of relief. It didn't alleviate any of the knots in his stomach concerning this exam, but he'd been training and developing his quirk around speed and mobility. This exam was for him. He hoped. They would be given targets and 6 balls. The targets would have to be placed in places where they could be easily seen. The aim was to protect all 3 of your targets from being lit up by the balls and at the same time eliminate 2 opponents to qualify. The place the candidates stood in began to fall apart, and the students soon found themselves in the grounds the exams would take place. They were only minutes away from slugging it out on this varied combat ground. All the students were fully suited up in their costumes. Midoriya fiddled with his gear a bit to be sure everything was in order. He had massive improvements with his upgrade done, and he'd hoped to see the fruits of his development here and possibly get his license. No, not possibly, he would get it. The provisional license to him would bring him closer to actualizing and carrying the legacy of the symbol of peace. All might left him. Lastly, he strapped the targets to himself just like everyone was doing. One on the inside of his left arm, a tricky target to hit, another on his right breast, and the last on his waist. The exams had begun. The wisest thing to do was to stay as a team and attack. Midoriya knew this, which was why he tried to rally Wana together, but people like Bakugo and Shoto decided to play it solo, leaving the posse. The attacks came flying in to disorient the class. Ketsubutsu High, a school they'd come to learn of earlier on, attacked, spearheaded by Yoshindo. Midoriya crouched his knees. He centered his weight down onto his feet, applying heavy pressure to the sole of his feet. Instantly, the pressure propulsion the mechanism in his boot. The circular compartment swirled open and the magnetic propulsion was activated, hovering him off the ground. He activated Black Whip and shot a tendril from his palm, the bind wrapping tight around a huge boulder. The momentum sprung him forward effortlessly. Air resistance and friction were reduced to bare minimum with his upgrades, like being pulled along by a ski. Midoriya weaved and dodged all around the orange balls headed for him, sailing through the air with celerity, and took cover behind the rock. He slumped against the rock and inhaled sharply, pulling his respirator over his mouth. "Let's do this, guys," Midoriya yelled in encouragement to his classmates. The class pushed on, countering the attacks of their rivals. At this point it was a stalemate. How quickly everything would change. And Midoriya felt it before it happened. Well, more like it punched him in the head. An overwhelming pain seared his brain, causing him to crumble to the ground with him head in his arms. A sign of things to come. He'd almost even forgotten that he had this danger sense, a premonition quirk of the 4th user that allowed him to tell impending doom. Sadly, he didn't have control over it, and it came as it pleased, just like now. "Guys, why you have to get it away? Something's about to," Midoriya managed to stutter, but it fell to deaf ears of rather the preoccupied ears of his class, who probably didn't hear him or didn't understand what he meant, considering none of them knew he possessed this quirk. Then it happened. The earth began to tremble and rumble, making Midoriya's teeth chatter and his body bounce. With one burst, the earth beneath their feet ruptured and tore apart, sending him and the rest of his class hurtling. "Ugh," Midoriya groaned, slowly coming to. A voice boomed throughout the stadium announcing that Inasa from Shiksu has passed, crushing over 100 examinees in the process. Midoriya pushed away the rubble he was trapped underneath. Getting to his feet and dusting himself, he asserted the situation and realized the attack had split him and the rest of the class. He was now alone. But somehow the announcement seemed to make him giddy. His blood bubbled in excitement. He slowly turned around to move in the other direction, but then he gripped his head in pain, his head throbbing sharply once again. But just as he did, a hand passed by where his left arm was with a bang, and hand aiming to hit his target. Staggering, Midoriya managed to sidestep, letting Kami, a girl from Shiksu, pass by. That was close. His guard was down for a second and he almost got tagged. "You're kind of cute," Kami said, charging towards Midoriya, trying to catch him while he was still gathering. But Midoriya was alert. Starting a run of his own, he closed the distance and leaped. He used his toes to pressure his boots and the propulsion shot him higher into the air. He turned to face a shocked Kami, who just turned to face him. Midoriya launched attack of his own, throwing an orange ball aiming to hit her target, but she weaved away from the ball's path. Just as he dropped to the ground crouched, Midoriya rose quickly, aiming to keep his attention on Kami, but she was gone in that split second. "Where is?" Midoriya started, confused, but he already suspected even without danger sense. Turning sharply, he saw Kami behind him, aiming for his target again. Smartly, he pushed her hand away and aimed a ball of his own at her target, driving it at her. But her reflexes were sharp. Out of nowhere, she dropped down, did a back roll away from him. "Oh, you're good too, but you won't be able to beat me," Kami chimed. Midoriya smiled. He raised his right arm up, using his left arm to brace. He flowed Black Whip into the aperture on the gauntlets on his hand. The space filled. The device instantly reacted, shooting the tendril. Black lightning. Kami couldn't even react. The tendril blazed past her left side in an instant. She blinked, trying to regain her composure. "That was quick, but you're a bad aim," she said. "I wasn't aiming for you," Midoriya said with a smile on his face. Kami turned her head quickly to see what he meant, but it was already set. Midoriya pulled back his arm sharply and the whip retracted, coming back the same way it came, but this time with the ball he'd thrown earlier. Skillfully, he sharply pulled the ball. Controlling Black Whip, he hit the target on her left shoulder, lighting it up. "That's one down," Midoriya said confidently. The girl paused for a while and began to chuckle oddly. The moment he blinked, she was gone. He felt a sharp push on his back, driving him to the ground with his arm pinned painfully to his back. He wondered whether her quirk had to do with teleportation, as Kami now had him restrained and at her mercy. "I wonder what you have planned," she whispered in his ear. Before she could deal any real damage, he nudged her in the midsection with the tip of his elbow and pushed her off, getting to his feet. Streaks of orange began to whiz past them. The Ketsubutsu students had arrived to attack. Midoriya dodged the attacks, and just like that, Kami was gone, but now Ochako had appeared and was about to be the center of their attacks. A tendril fastened to her waist as Midoriya swerved towards her in an instant, sweeping her off her feet and into his arms as he fled faster than the students could catch up and took shelter behind a rock. He scanned the area from behind, but it was quite odd that Ochako hadn't acted to save herself. She could have easily floated away from there, and he just remembered seeing a lit-up target on her left arm. Midoriya turned in time to slap an orange ball out of her hands. "You're Kami, right? So that's your quirk," he said, calm and company. He wondered why danger sense hadn't alerted him of Kami. Was it because he didn't view the image of Ochako as a threat? The Ochako doppelganger smiled and began to morph into Kami, but nude. Midoriya was somewhat disoriented by her appearance, but was able to fend off her flurry of attacks, dodging left, right, crouch, and sidestep. Training with Aizawa had honed his reflexes. Help was on the way as the real Ochako and Hanta had made their way onto the scene. Outnumbered, Kami was forced to flee in her birthday suit. "We'll meet again, Izuku," she chuckled as she fled. He was happy to meet up with his friends, but he wouldn't drop his guard. Midoriya ensured they were really his classmates. He didn't want another episode like that recurring. Midoriya began to plot with Ochako and Shiro. There was no time to be lost. Only 100 could pass, and already 30 people had passed the exams. It was a race against time. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals, have a fantastic day.